Now, to analyze President Tinubu's directive to economic management team to review Federation account deductions, I'm joined now by Dr. Sam Amadi. He's the director of Abuja School of Political and Social Thought. Okay, social and political thought. Right. Right, Ms. Alice, thank you very much for joining us on Newsnight. It looks like the effect today, the Federal Executive Council had quite a lot on its plate.
Busy day.
Today, really busy day. Directives, freezes and all of that. But let's start with this directive to review all deductions and revenue retention practices, demanding, of course, actionable recommendations to the Federal Executive Council. It wants to take a look at what the customs are doing, the FIRS, that's the Internal Revenue Service, and what have you.
Well, I think it's probably the right thing to do at this point. I mean, the underlying concern here is raising revenue. Nigeria is not increasing productivity as much, so it has to focus on fiscal control, improve collection, which is probably why we have the tax reform and streamlining fiscal framework. And again, improving value for money, meaning reduce spend on both fiscal works and infrastructure and other stuff. And then savings, the president keep talking about savings. In the classical growth theory, capital accumulation, either by influx of capital or savings, is the only way you get the money to finance either production or human development. But again, and so the notion around this retention is the idea of incentivizing collection. And so building on the theory of motivation. So the idea is, look, if we have agencies like now National Revenue Service or FIRS, I don't know whether they have even changed their name, but FIRS, okay, let's stick with FIRS.
Let's stay with FIRS.
FIRS, okay. Yeah. So if you look at FIRS, they do, under the Petroleum Industry Act, they do the assessment for the hydrocarbon tax and royalties and everything, and they're the collector. And so they collect also other non-oil and gas revenue for the government. So the idea is that we incentivize them. So if they take, and the new tax administration law that now recreates it, talks about 4% now. In the old FRS Act of 2007, it talked about the Senate determining a percentage of withholding that funds what it calls is fund, the FRSF fund, which it also uses, interestingly, in that act to even amortize expenditure by chairman, commissioners, and everything. It gives them a leeway to crowd in so much money. And look at, if you do a physical assessment of the houses they have in Abuja offices, someone would argue that perhaps they don't need to do this kind of physical structures to do their work. But they have the funds, so they can always have more money and spend. They can always, again, they're not part of
spend in the right direction.
Spend. They need to spend, increase salaries, other things. The language of the law and allowance gives them room to do more than prudent expenditure. So it seems to me that the present, urgent here is important. That if you look at for example, Petroleum Industry Act, I think 258 or thereabout talks about the fiscal framework is to optimize revenue for the federal government, and using risk assessment to know how to improve or reduce risk. So,
but it's one thing to want to optimize revenue from these agencies, but do they have the capacity for these revenue collections, including the customs?
For example, they collect, but the point is, if you reduce this withholding, would they have the incentive to collect? That's the problem. People say, okay, if they know they're going to make money collecting more, it's like the perverse incentive. In private sector, that's what across the world, actually, you see good governments outsource collection to private enterprises. So they are on percentage, and that gives incentive for them sometimes to smash heads.
So fundamentally,
so the question here for me is, if the government wants to optimize revenue savings, then it makes sense that they should reduce or remove this withholding. And then these agencies will live on budget. They could still have salaries that are different from mainline public service as an incentive, but those salaries become part of an annual budget, and rather than asking them to withhold, it looks back like a PSA, the production sharing formula that we use for PSA's contracts with oil companies. They bury the cost, and then they increase cost, reduce the revenue. So federal government is suffering that these guys have incentive to increase costs and take it from the doctor.
So fundamentally, I mean, there are so many issues to look at here. with this savings, will it translate in terms of Nigeria slowing down on external borrowing? Will it in any way reflect? Because we're told, for example, with saving of, removal of subsidy and what have you, that we're going to save money, but we're still going about it.
It's like, it's a form, an equation with two variables. The first variable is you made savings, which is important when you're going through fiscal crisis. The second is that you translate those savings to fruitful, prudent expenditure. And that's where two things happen. The BPE and the presidency.
Bureau of Public Enterprises.
Today, they have approved a lot of procurements of important services and goods. But are they going to go through a real cost-efficient process?
That's the question.
So even if you make savings, which is what we've seen the last couple of 2 years, that we make savings, governors are reporting savings, increasing their own revenue. But those increases may not so the magic that translates revenue increase to service provision and impact is the quality of policies and services and the prudence. So yes, one of the formula is right in here. We want to make more savings, get more revenue. The second variable of the formula is we'll now have to be more prudent in our procurements, in our contracts. If they do that, then there's two variables, the equation is balanced. More savings will not translate to less borrowing and better human development.
There you go. Okay, so now the federal government also decided to freeze creation of new federal universities, polytechnics and colleges of education. Federal. I'm not sure it applies to private universities because
that's confusion.
There's approval for 7 new private
but
universities.
the language they said for now,
7 years.
Meaning that these ones escaped because they came before the other. But so let's assume it's
What do you make of the reason being given to improve efficiency and everything that needs improvement in
I think the government is right in the objective
sector.
they want to pursue. I think it's really ridiculous that somebody will go to the National Assembly and pass a law to set up a nonsense university somewhere. You can't set up universities through such process of lawmaking. I mean, you say the act. They should be part of a government strategy. So government should be looking at first cost-benefit analysis. Do we really need this school of fishing? So the notion of this confusion is bad, but then the approach is strong. It's not a year moratorium. It's control to say what first the NUC regulation on universities may need to change. And so you need to provide a much more capabilities. The Prime Minister talked about schools that don't have retainers. People are not applying to JAMB.
Those schools.
They don't have even facilities. So the question is first, government itself. Government should stop, creating more schools, establishing more schools where they can't properly fund the ones. Private sector should have no moratorium, in my view. It should be that you increase the conditions to meet. And there's no reason why people cannot have a mono university or have schools with small
focusing on
or schools with small attendance. So I think that we should unlock that control over private university. We should only control for quality. Even if we do 12 years moratorium, there's no guarantee that when the 12 years lapses, that you're going to have better funding, better structures. So the key thing is about quality control, not time out. So we don't need to say no more fiscal, no more universities, whether federal or private, but we have to say we need to now increase the threshold, whether in terms of fiscal ability, you have to show us the budget, whether in terms of curriculum development and manpower. So maybe it's now time to rethink about first government. Government should stop setting up schools as some political support for people. So you set up one whether some Amadi is senator, and then I get a bill, say one University of Cassava in Imerewe, Ngobala. That's what is the problem. But if you set your rules well, then there's no need for time out. Rather, you have strengthened and much more difficult conditions so that the quality of universities will be assured and the fiscal
meet global standards.
Yes,
Dr. Sam Amadi, Arise News analyst, thank you very much for joining us on News Night tonight.
Thank you.